Hello children, today I shall be telling you about the sense of collective belonging. So my dear children, in my previous videos lectures, I have explained to you in details about the different freedom struggles movements which happened in Indian society, and during these nationalism movements in Indian society, we see the involvement of the different social groups who came together. They understood that it is their struggles, and when they understood that it is their struggles, they started participating in the civil disobedience movement, in the non-cooperation movements, and they fought against the colonial rule. So dear children, in spite of participating in all these nationalism movements, there is a question that how different communities, different social groups, different religious groups, different languages groups who came together, because Indian society is a society which is comprising of different cultures, different religions, different kind of regions. So in the midst of all these differences, how the peoples they united together, how they came together, how they developed the sense of collective belongingness in the society, how they developed the idea of nationalisms. So such kind of questions which is coming into mind. And how it is coming into mind? Because there is diversity cultures, there is diversity in religion, there is diversity in languages. So in spite of all this diversity, how peoples they united together, came together, and they developed this sense of unity during the time of nationalism movements in Indian society. So my dear children, in spite of having all these social differences, we the Indian peoples are standing for unity, because such kind of cultural diversity, religions diversity, languages differences, all these things which never divided the society, rather than in spite of having all these cultural differences, religious differences, we peoples we together united and we started the nationalism movements in Indian society. So my dear children, here there is one thing which bound the peoples together, and what is that? The experiences of united struggles. Because during the time of the colonial power, the Indian societies were facing lot of challenges, lot of difficulties, and there was operations which was done by the British government, and due to that many peoples were experiencing that it is the united struggles which will bind the peoples together. And so dear children, when the peoples were facing real challenges in the society, they were considering that they are part of the same nations. In spite of having the differences, many people they begin to understood that they are part of the same nations. They are part of the same nations. It is part of the united struggles, and all these concepts which prepared them to start the nationalism movements in Indian society. So dear children, during the time of these nationalism movements, we see the cultures which played a very vital role, and it is the cultures, it is the history, it is the fictions, it is the folklore, it is the songs which united the peoples together. We see that during the time of these nationalism movements, there are so many concepts which came into being, and those concepts are such as the concepts of Bharat Mata. Because the concepts of Bharat Mata, it was identified in the form of figure or images. So here how peoples they relate their life with the nations, because they develop the concept of Bharat Mata, and the image as well as the figure of Bharat Mata which relate the nations, and in which people they understood that it is their motherland. When people understood the concept of Bharat Mata, which was developed in 20th century, when they relate their nations with the concept of Bharat Mata, peoples were having strong dedications. Why? Because peoples were considering that it is their motherland. It is the motherland which has the responsibility of the people to protect the motherland. So that is the reasons the concepts of Bharat Mata which challenged the peoples here. And how it challenged the peoples? Because many peoples, in spite of having the different cultures, different religions, different languages, people they begin to understood that it is the part of their struggles and they need to protect their motherland. And when they understood the concepts of motherland in the image of Bharat Mata, peoples were having strong dedications towards the nations. And when they had strong dedications and commitment, they came together and they fought against the colonial power. So my dear children, the concepts of Bharat Mata, it came into being in 20th century and it was identified with the image of Bharat Mata. And who created it? It was created by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya. And in 1870s, he wrote the concepts of Vande Mataram. And it is the hymn to the motherland. So already I have told you that the Bharat Mata concepts, which has been symbolizes the nations here, peoples they began to understood the concepts of motherland, and when they understood the concept of motherland, they were having strong commitment towards the nations. So my dear children, later on these concepts which was included during the Swadeshi movements, and the Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya, he included in his novel, and what is his novel? Anand. And the songs was sung during the time of Swadeshi movement. Because here the Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya, he written a hymn called Vande Mataram, and during the time of nationalism movements, the hymn Vande Mataram was very popular. The concepts of Bharat Mata was very popular because peoples were shared with the concepts of Bharat Mata. And after that we see, moved by the Swadeshi movements, Abanindranath Tagore, what he did was he painted the famous paintings. And what is his paintings? The painting is all about Bharat Mata. And he explained here as she is very calm, very composed, very divine, very spiritual. So here the Abanindranath Tagore is relating the concepts of Bharat Mata with the motherland. So my dear children, the cultures which played a very vital role during the French revolutions also. Because in French society, in European society, there was a diverse culture. So what made peoples to come together? It was the culture. Because many peoples were facing difficulties during the time of kings and emperor. So such kind of experiences which bound the people together to have the united struggles against the emperor. So like that we see that during the time of nationalism movements, the revolutionaries, the freedom fighter, they developed the songs, the images of Bharat Mata, to challenge the peoples here, so that people will understand the concepts, people will understand that it is part of their struggles, and when they will understand that it is the duties as well as responsibility of every citizens to protect the motherland, and that is the reason to challenge the peoples. Such kind of cultures were used during the nationalism movements in Indian society. So, dear children, as I was telling you about the importance of cultures during the nationalism movements in Indian society. So, dear children, the nationalist leaders, they began to use the folk tales, the songs, and while they were touring or going to the villages. And what was their motive of doing that? Because they wanted to convey the message of nationalism to a large sections of the Indian society. So during that time, there was the images of Bharat Mata, the concepts as well as the hymn of Vande Mataram, the poetry, the folk songs, these stories, the ballads, the rhymes, these myths, all these concepts were used to communicate the messages to the large sections of peoples. And in those times we see that if the illiterate peoples are there, to communicate them the concepts of nationalism feelings, they use the images of Bharat Mata. So dear children, already we have discussed that the romantic cultures, the history, the folklore songs, these folk dances, these musics, the arts, the stories, the myths, all these concepts which played a very vital role during the nationalism movements in Indian society. So dear children, in Bengal regions we see the Rabindranath Tagore, which is beginning to collecting different kind of ballads, different kind of nursery rhymes, different kind of myths to challenge the peoples, to convey the message to the peoples. He is collecting all these stories, the ballads, the rhymes, the myths, so that the peoples will understand the importance of nationalism movements in Indian society. Not only that, in southern parts we see in Madras the Natesa Sastri. He published the 4-volume collections of Tamil folk tales. So here in Madras also we see the Natesa Sastri. He published the 4 volumes of folk tales so that it will challenge the lives of the peoples. And during the nationalism movements, dear children, we understand that the nationalist leaders, they were very aware of the symbols as well as the different kind of icons. And during the Swadeshi movements, we see in Bengal regions, the tricolor flag was designed, and it was designed during that time in Bengal region. So dear children, as I was telling you about the Swadeshi movements in Bengal regions, the tricolor flag was designed. And apart from that, there is a crescent moon which is representing the both Hindus and Muslims. And by 1921, Gandhiji himself had designed the Swaraj flag. So dear children, during the 19th centuries, many Indians, they created a sense of pride by referring to the Indian history. So how they discovered the past glory of Indian society? Here the nationalists, the Indian nationalists, they created a sense of pride because they were telling themselves that the Indian societies were having a very glorious history, and during those periods the Britishers were looking the Indians as inferior. They were looking them as backward. They were looking them down, and in returns the Indians were showing their pride about the past glory of the Indian society. So my dear children, even though the British peoples were seeing the Indians as backward and incapable of governing the society, during that time the Indian peoples were relating their lives. They were rediscovering the past glory of the Indian society. They were saying and giving themselves a sense of pride that there was a time, there was a period that Indian societies were very prosperous in having arts, music, science, culture, and then at the same time religion, philosophy, crafts. So what the Indian leaders were doing? They were conveying the messages to the Britishers that we Indians are not lacking good things, or we are not lacking knowledge in the society. Why? Because when we see the past glory of the Indian society, the Indian societies were having full of literature. There was discovery of science, there was discovery of arts, there was discovery of philosophy, arts, crafts. So this is how they were showing the pride during the time of nationalism movements in Indian society. So my dear children, as we understood that during the nationalism movements, many of the leaders, they were challenging the peoples to involve in the nationalism struggles, because during that period we see that the nationalists who sacrificed their life for the nations, for the motherland, to free the Indian society from the colonial power. Because during the colonialisms we understand that there was lot of operations, activities made by the colonial ruler. So the Indian peoples were having very hard time, and when they were no longer able to tolerate such kind of injustice in the societies, they came out and they started the nationalism movements in Indian society. So dear children, at the conclusion point we understood that it is the nationalist leaders who dedicated their life for the nations, and we understand that the leaders of the society, they understood the grievances as well as the problems of the community. They united the struggles. They brought peoples together into the society, and they started the nationalism movements in Indian society. So my dear children, when Gandhiji understood the ground reality of the Indian society, understood the difficulties of the Indian society, he organized the nationalism movements in the Indian society, and with the cooperations of the different social groups, the nationalism movement was happened in Indian society. So dear children, here the colonial rule was opposed by the Indian society. Why it was opposed? Because there was the injustice which made by the colonial ruler. The peoples were having grievances, the peoples were having problems, the peoples were having anger, the peoples were having dissatisfactions towards the Britisher. And when they were having dissatisfactions, anger, during that time, all these leaders, they united the peoples together, started the movements, fought against the Britisher, and they fought to have freedom in the society. So my dear children, this is how different nationalism movements had been organized in Indian society against the colonial power. so that Indian society would get freedom from the British government. Thank you so much for listening to me.